Minutes after 6. I am Stephanie Carter, the Vice Chair of the Commission. I am standing in today for our Chairperson, Frances Todoro Hargreaves, who is out of town. And I'm going to call the October meeting of the Ann Arbor Independent Community Police Oversight Commission to order. And I'm going to ask Ms. Jeanette to please do the roll call.
Okay. Chair Dodoro is absent. Commissioner Jackson is absent. Commissioner Shipp is absent. Commissioner Pipkins? Here. Commissioner Milgram?
Here.
Commissioner Hoffman?
Present.
Vice Chair Carter?
Here.
Commissioner Harrison?
Present.
Commissioner Milgram? Miser, sorry, is absent. And Commissioner Billups.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve? Well, first of all, are there any amendments to the agenda? If not, can I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Make a motion to approve this October meeting agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. And if there are no amendments to the agenda, then the motion has been made and properly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Now is the time for public forum. Ms. Jeunesse, do we have anyone waiting?
I don't have anyone online presently.
Okay. Thank you. The minutes from September's meeting are attached to your agenda. If everyone has had a chance to look at them, are there any amendments to the agenda? I'm sorry, to the minutes? If not, is there a motion to...
Sorry.
That's okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of September 27th, 2022?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the September meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. No further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion passes, and the minutes from the September 27th, 2022 meeting are approved. Under our old business is a resolution regarding the unarmed response. I know there's been a lot of discussion. As you know, we sent a statement to council basically expressing our disappointment at the way things were moving along with the unarmed response. And there was a response to that, which was submitted by the city administrator. Yesterday, I attended a meeting along with Councilperson Song and our chairperson and Commissioner Jackson. And there was in-depth discussion. Now, we were supposed to be meeting, as part of our meeting tonight, we were going to work on or propose or discuss a resolution to council with regard to our feelings as to how these preparations for the unarmed response program were going. Let me ask Councilperson Song, do you have any comments at this point about the meeting yesterday or in general?
I think what City Administrator Milton Tahoney wanted to express to everyone is that he's heard these concerns. He understands where they're coming from. And at my request, I've asked for him to give to council and the commission a calendar of how this consultant who's working through the unarmed crisis response community engagement will engage the community. So if we have a sense of what to expect, when to expect it, then I think we'd have a better way of responding, instead of just, I guess, waiting for them to invite us to do something for them. I'm hoping that if we have this calendar, we can actually work more collaboratively with a consultant. So, and this is a priority that the city administrator has made, and that he will be directly responsive to that.
Well, I was personally satisfied yesterday with our meeting with the city administrator. We did indicate to him that we would be preparing a response to his response. There were certain things that we wanted to make sure are cleared up. I asked specifically, according to the contract that the city has with these consultants, there was a timeline. And by April or May, they were supposed to have a plan. And we asked whether there is a plan, because perhaps some of the things that we thought hadn't been done or don't plan to be done, maybe they're part of the plan. But as of yet, we haven't seen the plan. So I'm hopeful that we can move along. Now, Commissioner Jackson has a point-by-point presentation or response that I had hoped she'd be able to share with us tonight, but she was unable to come to the meeting. So I would imagine that within the next week or two, we will be receiving that point-by-point and perhaps a draft. Now, this was my idea, and it doesn't have to, I can open the floor if anyone wants to comment. I sort of don't like the, you said this, we said this, and going back and forth. And so I had thought once we have our response to the administrator's response, that we would actually submit it to him first before we send it to council. And if he has problems with it, questions, whatever, additions, then he can make those. And then we can, send it on. So I don't know if anyone has any particular thoughts on that idea, but I thought that might help both with our relations with the city administrator and getting an understanding of where we're going on this. So
I think it would be helpful that we trust, of course, the committee of people who have gotten the response from the city administrator, but it might be good just in general that if we as commissioners got a chance to see that response, so that we know that what the questions are, the things that Commissioner Jackson and others have already put together, that it adequately responds to those questions if possible. So,
thank you, Commissioner Billups. I would imagine, and again, I'm not running this train. I would imagine that once we get the point by point that I understand Commissioner Jackson is preparing, that we would distribute that to the other commissioners and invite input. By the way, this might be a good place. After speaking with Chair Teodoro Hargreaves, I sent a memo to the city attorney with some questions about the Open Meetings Act and just what we can do and what we can't do away from our meetings. And I got a very good and comprehensive response back from the city attorney. I told him I appreciate that. And I will share that. I just got it this afternoon. But I then noticed that in our notebook, our 3-ring binder that I think everybody has, there's a section on the Open Meetings Act and what we can and can't do at our meeting and in smaller groups. So I'm going to pass on the email what I also learned today, and I did not have any idea of this, any communication, written communication that we send out to each other, to everybody on the commission, is a public record. So just so that we're aware of that, and I would suggest that everybody maybe go to your three-wing binder sometime and read that section on the Open Meetings Act in terms of what we can and cannot do when we're not in our open meeting. So I don't know if anyone else, again, I had thought there might be more discussion today. Is there anything that anyone would like to just make a record of at this point, and maybe so that Commissioner Jackson has some verbal input from us with regard to our communication to council, and then the written response that we got, that council got from the city administrator?
I think one of the issues that we have is just not knowing the proper way of communicating with each other. And sometimes we follow a path. We are independent, and we have to convey the concerns of the citizens that we represent over here. And we want to make sure that all segments of our community is being represented and being spoken to or heard from. So this is where we come from. And we should make this quite clear to whomever we raise a concern to. But I agree that we should not go back and forth in terms of who's right, who's not. It's not a zero sum. It's a something that we learn from each other, and we build on the positives. We try to elucidate the things that are not clear, make sure that the issues are being addressed properly, and we can do this really in a way that does not reflect that there is a tension or there is a little bit of discourse between the commission and whether the city, the administrator, or the police department. We should work together in a way that would promote a positive interactions and positive results that would reflect the aspirations of the community that we represent.
Thank you. I totally agree. And then I just want to add to that, one of the concerns that some of us had about the administrator's response is that it called into question the veracity of some of the things that we were saying. And as Commissioner Jackson pointed out, we want to be seen as entirely truthful in everything that we do, and up front and above board on everything that we do. So when anything that we put out is challenged as being not accurate, we probably do need to respond in some way to that. Yes, Commissioner?
I guess I want to sort of echo what Commissioner Othman said. Both of your points actually about I've had some frustration not knowing how we can communicate with one another here, or what are the best ways to communicate. And I know that, and I have read the Open Meetings Act, but I actually, frankly, think it's a little vague, or it just doesn't quite answer my question about email communications. I mean, there's a specific section about emailing during an open meeting. And I think, out of an abundance of caution, there have been suggestions and other things I've read that, never reply all if but, so I will look forward to seeing what the city attorney has written to see if there is more specificity there. And we should figure out how we can talk about, without violating the Open Meetings Act, how we can best communicate with one another outside of these meetings. So that's point number one. And point number two, I also, when I read the city administrator's memo, I was quite taken aback by it because of the specificity of it and the forcefulness of it. And so I did feel like we should probably respond to that with the same amount, in kind. At the same time, you folks our leadership has had a discussion with him today. It sounds like it was candid and positive. And so I also don't know how much we need to spend going back and forth or looking back. If we can find common ground now and go forward, that's the most important thing. If we can find, and I'm interested to see what Commissioner Jackson has already provided and what she's going to send to us. But I mean, if we can, rather than, and I know I suggested it myself, we need to be just as specific, but maybe not if we've already agreed on some things in private, and we can just make the major points and be on the record about that and emphasize moving forward together. Let's not look back. Let's move forward now. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Milburn. Any other comments for the record at this point with regard to the whole issue of where we are on the unarmed response matter? All right, if not, and that reply all, you can't reply all and without it and still comply with the Open Meetings Act. For our emails.
Is that regardless of what you're communicating? I mean, for instance, you can send an agenda and maybe respond to that.
I think you can do that. What I was told basically is that if you're going to do a reply all, you also need to include staff so that that becomes a public record.
Okay.
So, yeah. I will, as I said, just got this afternoon, and,
Well, if we include Denise.
I'm sorry?
If we include Denise, then it becomes public record.
It becomes a public record. So, yeah.
And then therefore not a violation of the open meeting?
That's correct, as I understand it.
The one thing I think probably that would a little bit clarify this gray area is if the email comes from Denise as our liaison, and we respond to Denise only. So we don't have to
Respond to her
everyone.
only.
Just to Denise because.
But then
has
we're not
everything.
communicating among ourselves.
What we have, there might be some kind of a project you are working with, a subcommittee.
Right.
The 2 or 3 of you can
Sure.
communicate.
Sure.
And it's not a quorum. And it's
Right.
just to facilitate the issue that you are dealing with. Everybody is doing a little bit assignment and here and there. And, at the end, you update each other about that. That's not a violation
Right.
of that. And then, as if you're a representative of that task force, now you present the findings of that subcommittee to the overall. And that would be open, and that would be a record. But I think if we have, like the agenda, if we get it from Denise, if you have an issue to be added to the agenda, probably pass it to Denise. We don't have to probably send it to everyone.
Right, but at the same time, if she's included in the email, we can reply to everybody. And maybe it's a question you want to throw out to everybody, just to get a sense of what other people are thinking too. I mean, what would be the harm? I mean, now that you've clarified that as long as a staff member is on the email, we can have a discussion, and it becomes part of the public record, and it's not a violation. I'm not suggesting that we reply all on every issue, but
Right.
if we can operate that way and have discussions among ourselves, I think it would be a good thing for us.
I think the issue is that if you're deliberating as a majority, then the public doesn't have an opportunity to give public comments and respond to it. So,
Correct.
and that's why that work the deliberation has to happen here versus if you were in smaller committees and reporting to each other and just relying on someone to lead the committee. Yeah.
But
I
there's a
think
question
that-
as to what, I mean, maybe we should table this and wait for the memo and.
Yeah,
but-
we can, and if there are specific questions, I think the city attorney is open to
No.
addressing, any specifics that aren't included in this response or what's in our packet already.
Okay.
But I think it's just a matter of understanding that what you say in that email,
Mhm.
if it goes to everybody, it's a public record and it can be FOIA'd.
Correct.
So,
But you can have work groups that are 2 or 3 and work amongst yourself, but you cannot make decisions and vote on things via email as a commission.
Right, but, I mean, I used to practice law, so, I know enough now, just enough to be extremely dangerous, but it's been a while. But, I mean, I read the Open Meetings Act, and I'm not sure that I quite understand. Out of an abundance of caution, you just, don't have a discussion by email. But are there things you can actually discuss that don't rise to the level of deliberations? I think
Sure.
there probably are. And so I'd be interested in learning more about that
Yeah.
and figuring out ways. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who feels this way, but, and I'm fairly new to the commission, but I felt like we've been siloed a little bit and not able to speak with one another. And maybe I haven't been proactive enough in reaching out to certain commissioners separately. But, we can only have a discussion here. It hamstrings you a little bit. I've been on plenty of boards, and frankly, for me, it's the first time I've been on a commission or a board that was subject to the Open Meetings Act. So,
yeah.
so
And
it's a little, it's been a little frustrating, I guess, for me.
You can have phone calls, and they're like those and Zoom meetings, which are different from like email communication. So
Yeah.
it might be more timely if there's like an issue that you want to speak to in a more timely manner. Phone calls work, and I think what's foible is probably like the appointment that you actually have the call, but not like no one expects you to submit a transcript of the call. It'd be hard to get everyone on a call, but,
Right.
yeah. Yes, I think we forget that phones, we still have phones. We can call each other.
I think you've all humored me long enough. I think we can move on.
And we may get into that a little more because we are going to be talking about our committee structure. And I know that's something that the chair wants to get us back into our active committees as we move into this next year of service. Anything else on the unarmed response issue? So we were supposed to look at doing a resolution today. I would propose, and perhaps someone would move that the issue of a further resolution be tabled until we get all input in terms of what we're going to do.
I make a motion that we take the unarmed response resolution off the table for now, and that we revisit it at our next meeting until we get all the stuff that we need to have together.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. So the motion is to chair the issue of a resolution, response resolution regarding the unarmed response issue until we have further information, and we'll bring it back up at the next meeting. All in favor? I'm sorry, any questions? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, the motion passes. Does anyone have any other old business that we just did not include on the agenda? All right, then we're going to move along to new business. We had, I don't know how many committees we had at one time. Commissioner Hoffman, what committee were you on?
Outreach,
On the outreach. Were there other committees that anyone was serving on besides the outreach committee?
I thought we had outreach, and then we started having the small group that met to review, or that we still have to review police complaints, that small group.
Correct.
Ms. Janeth,
And we had a budget committee.
and a budget committee.
Okay.
That's right.
Did the budget committee meet?
Yeah. Earlier on, when we
Yes.
first started,
Correct.
that committee would meet, yes.
Yes.
Do we need a budget committee?
I think so. We have a set aside amount of money that's used for this commission that we need to decide yearly what we use it on. If it's Nicola stuff, or if it's for other trainings, or if it's for legal things. So I think we should be looking at, what monies we have and how it gets spent.
Okay. So we're looking at the community outreach, and with regard to the community outreach, the community, we're a independent community commission. And so the community needs to know that we're here and why we're here, and that we invite their input in everything that we do. So we need an active outreach committee. Commissioner Jackson and I had discussed, we don't even know what groups there are. We need a list of community groups that we can contact them, let them know we're here. We can come out and speak to your group and tell you about the commission. So I would ask that, does anyone think we need any more committees? Budget committee and the community outreach committee. Now, committees can meet. They can't make any decisions, but they can meet. And I'm also informed that they can meet by Zoom, so you don't have to get together. The small committees can meet by Zoom. Does anyone think we need any other committees other than budget and community outreach?
I know Commissioner Jackson has mentioned and maybe this is just the community outreach part, but a communications, I don't know if committee necessarily, but and maybe we should wait, and I could ask her what she has had in mind for that, because she's talked to me about, for instance, helping her write an annual report. So I don't know that it's part of the community outreach, but just communications in general, potentially. I'm not sure, but
Seems to
that's
me
a
that makes sense for a communications committee, because we are supposed to be preparing an annual report. And if MLive wants to know what we're doing, somebody that they can, communicate with.
Mm-hmm.
Just for, if I can interject for a second, just for some historical stuff, the outreach committee in the past has done things like help to create the logo that's used and engage young people in designing the logo. They also hosted an informational meeting at the library, and also part of what we did as outreach was the thing that happened at U of M that Commissioner Shipp put together last year, talking about how young people wanted to see policing in the community. So there has been some things that the outreach group has done. It's sort of fallen apart in the last, year or so, but there's been some great work that had started that whoever joins that committee, they can continue to build on those things, so.
Right. Thank you. So,
Also, we need to have a committee of the information managers, because that's also to review the complaints. And we have quite a number of those, and that is more or less of time-consuming, but can be done like within the space of where you are. You don't have to go anywhere because you access the information. So I think we have For the 2021, we have about 36 complaints, and I think we have near that 2022. So that stuff needs to be reviewed and to let the community know that there is an active stuff going on and reviewing the complaints. So that's, I think this.
We can call that another committee.
This is an essential part. I think besides the outreach, this is really an important component of our commission.
Okay. So when the chair returns, I think we have listed 4 committees that we think this commission ought to have active, those being community outreach, the budget committee, a communications committee, which would be responsible, among other things, for the annual report, and the information managers. And they meet, once a month?
Correct.
So I would ask everyone to think about which one or two of these committees you'd like to serve on. And we're looking towards activating the committee. As Commissioner Billups said, over the last year, we've been embroiled in some other things. And so our committee activity has sort of been pushed to the side. So let's think about for the next meeting, and let's put on the agenda for the next meeting, reactivation of our committees. We can think of 4, and perhaps the chair has something additional in mind. But if everybody can say, okay, I'm going to serve, I'm going to spend time actively on one of these committees. Okay, anything else about committees?
Can I'd love to serve on the outreach committee. We had, the Asian American community had met with our police department, I think the end of the summer, and the committee came, a lot of parents came in response to the anti-Asian hate that the community had experienced over the past 2 years, came for a PowerPoint presentation, and I think at the end, my community said, I think we actually need to present to you. And it made me think how perhaps this is an opportunity for our commission to come to community events. So when there's Asian Lunar New Year or Mid-Autumn Moon Festival, I think there's 2 Chinese language schools, 7 Korean churches in town, 1 Pan-Asian church. I think the city has 17% population is Asian American. But relationships around police and working with police can be pretty convoluted, and maybe that's an opportunity where the commission can come and engage directly ahead of any incidences. Like we shouldn't have to wait for an incident to happen to introduce ourselves. And then as far as how committees work with each other, I'd be really interested to see if ICPOC would be open to having like joint meetings with other commissions. I'm on the Housing and Human Services Administration Committee. I'm also on, so for example, for that committee, we've had joint meetings with the Renters Commission. And we've presented to each other saying, these are the issues that they're outstanding. So like if ICPOC met with the Housing and Human Services Commission, you'll hear that we've got 500 eviction cases in our courts right now, underfunding of social housing supportive agencies, and how that directly relates to policing and safety issues in our community. So I feel like there are discussions that are happening, again, like in these silos. It'd be interesting to see where we can collaborate. So ICPOC, Housing, and then maybe ICPOC and Human Rights Commission. Just so that as we pursue like potential resolutions to come before council, we don't miss an opportunity to collaborate with each other if we don't really know who's on each commission. And maybe that's where the subgroups can kind of think about where we can collaborate by looking at the other commission's agendas or reaching out to the other chairs and saying like, hey, what are your top 3 issues that you've worked on. Does it relate to policing in any way? Would you like to collaborate on a resolution, which you've done before, right, with HRC? But maybe there's more.
Well, I think that's the kind of thing, and when I met with the chair last week, I know that's one of the things that she wants to do, and I told her I was willing to go out. Part of the problem, you mentioned the Asian American community. Well, we don't know who they are. We don't know what the organizations are. There are organizations, I suppose, in every community that we want to reach, but we don't know, who they are or when they meet or whether they want to hear from us or whatever. And we want to build relationships so that and it's not just, oh, something terrible happened. We want to build relationships with the community. And so that community outreach committee is going to be very important. And if anyone has any connections, like I say, we need a list. We need to know who's out there, who the community is, and reach out to them, let them know we're here and find out what their needs are. So I think that's going to be very important. So we will revisit the committee issues again. Now, next, I'll move on if there's nothing else about committees. Next on is the ICPOC Public Information Officer. Now, I don't know what that's about.
Okay. This is actually something that was added to is just a normal procedure where we appoint, as a commission, we appoint the chair or vice chair to represent the commission, like in terms of interacting with the media, or now we are meeting with the police or with the city administrator. So in this case, we know exactly who represents the commission. So it's just something that we had done in the past, just to make it a little bit more formal, that we appoint the chair or vice chair as other liaison with the media and also with other officials to meet with. So in this case, not every one of us will just go out and speak to the media.
Right.
So we just want to make
I
it a
see.
little bit more of a formal appointment.
And
That was the motion that I wanted to pass. And there is another one where a second motion will be the chair or vice chair can appoint any of the commissioners to a particular task. If we have a project, or if we have an issue we need to deal with, and we have someone on the commission who is an expert in that area, that person would be the go-to person to address or to deal with that task. It's more or less of ad hoc kind of thing. It's just one project done and it's done. So it's just give the chair or vice chair a little bit of leeway in terms of moving the commissioners to doing a few more things.
I certainly see the importance of having a public information officer so that if somebody calls me and asks for a comment on something that's happened, I would refer them to the public information officer. I would not be authorized. So this is a person, as I understand, who would be authorized to speak on behalf of the commission. And I think that the chair certainly needs to be present when we talk about that, because I would think that she'd be the person who would assume that responsibility and also make whatever appointments are necessary on an ad hoc basis. So I would ask that we move this to November's agenda, if that's all right.
So it's just, we can have it as a discussion, and next time we can vote on that when we have the full house.
Is that okay with everybody if we put that on next month's agenda, rather than addressing that at this point? I'd prefer to have the chair present. And by the way, I was back to the community outreach, as I understand it, there are still groups in our community that don't want a good relationship with the police department. I'm still trying to find out who those groups are. But I think those are the groups we need to reach out to. So I don't, maybe nobody knows what I'm talking about, but I have certainly heard that that's out there. Okay, next on the agenda is commissioner assignments. Again, is that something that the chair needs to do? That's what you were talking about?
Exactly.
Okay.
You assign a particular task to a commissioner or commissioners.
Okay, so we can move both of those
Correct.
items
Correct.
to November's agenda. Use of force training. Do we have anything planned, Ms. Janess, as far as you know?
We're trying to put together a use of force training for November or December, but the police department usually does not want to give a one-on-one. We were hoping for maybe 3 or more members to attend.
Do they have any dates, or do we just try to find a date when we will be available?
I
or-
sent an email with asking the commission what's best for them for November.
Okay.
And usually after they let me know, then I will pass that on to AAPD, and they can let us know their schedule, and we can go accordingly. Usually, it's usually a full day, so we can pick, would you rather have a end of the week, or usually not on weekends, or if we have to break it down, maybe a morning or an afternoon session 2 times.
And that is important. If there are commissioners who haven't yet gone through the use of force training, we need to know, what our officers, how our officers are trained. So if you received that email from Ms. Janess, please respond so she can put together a date in the upcoming month or so. Okay, do we have is there any other old or new business that any commissioner would like to bring to the commission's attention at this point?
If I can, I'd like to invite everyone to, the Washington Housing Alliance is having a conference on November 15th. It's a free summit on housing issues in the community, and Dr. Abdul El Sayed is the keynote. So I think all the housing agencies and folks who are really concerned about what's going on with agencies in the county, from Community Action Network, Avalon, yes, Bonnie. Jeez. So it'd be interesting. This is an opportunity to hear from a number of directors who are working directly on housing homelessness, and some of the folks are also very active in CROWS. So in the community response to, gosh, what does CROWS stand for now? It's the group that helped bring unarmed crisis response forward to council. So there's a lot of overlap and interest. So if folks are available, I'd really encourage you to come and join us.
Is there some kind of a public flyer or announcement or something that can go out to the commissioners so we have that information?
I can send the website where you can register, and Bonnie, you might have more information.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think it's available yet, but when
Oh.
the flyer's available, we'll make sure it gets out.
Would
when
you
I
send
see
it out to all the
Yeah,
commissioners?
as soon as I see it, I'll check my
Okay.
email.
All right, thank you. Okay,
Madam Chair?
yeah.
Excuse me, I just wanted to mention that the ICPOC training plan is attached to their agenda, so they can just look at the link and see the trainings that were mapped out from the committee last year.
So everybody can see that attached.
ICPOC training plan?
Yeah, the ICPOC training plan is
It's in your package
attached.
as well, the last page.
Attached is the last page after the minutes. And it is important that we know. I think at the last meeting, we talked about how important it was for those of us who could attend to go to the ICPOC conference a few weeks ago now. And it's important to be trained. We learn a lot from other oversight organizations around the country, what is being done, what can be done. Thank you. Are there any other communications, Mr. Ness?
No, I don't have any presently.
No one else is waiting to speak? No one in the audience is waiting to speak?
No, I don't have anyone.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else that any of the commissioners need to put on the record or speak to us about this evening? If not, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I second.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
What's that?